I think there's very little incentive for China to help the U.S. on Iran.
The Strait specifically.
In the Strait specifically. Just the immediate update from the Strait is that a boat was sunk yesterday. Another one was taken by Iranian forces and dragged toward the Iranian coastline. So no change there. And then the long term, and you talked about it yesterday, it was a story I did about Chinese companies, private companies, selling anti-aircraft missiles, or they're considering the sale of anti-aircraft missiles to Iran. China's long-term goal is for America's attempt at regime change in Iran to fail. They don't want that to succeed. They want this regime to exist. They want it to antagonize the U.S. They want the U.S. to lose resources there. They want it to be our Ukraine. So that's not going to change. I talked to a shipping expert who talked about how all these ships are going to resume. Even if there is a peace deal, China will continue to send components and fuel for missiles to help them rebuild their missile stock, no matter what agreement is reached. China, I think, will help Taiwan rebuild those missile stocks, get them anti-aircraft missiles. They'll do them through private companies, but China's goal is to weaken us. And I didn't see any breakthroughs regarding Iran in this trip.
Yeah, I'm not hearing any reporting. No, it really, what exactly was the win here? There seems to be no answer. A lot of private meetings and family members came, like a commerce gathering, Chamber of Commerce meeting in China.
It almost seemed like President Trump was playing the role of commerce secretary here in terms of trying to get some business deals done. There may be some vague outlines of agreements, but it's not sure that anything is concrete yet. We'll see what comes out next few days as both sides read out the particulars. But John Hammond, maybe the U.S. didn't inflame the situation with China, but it's not clear if anything really was accomplished. And for the president, I think the two big takeaways is that the situation in Iran remains unchanged, and we know the economic toll that's taking here in the United States, but also just a sense of weakness. That Xi Jinping is there in Beijing, presiding over the summit, by most measures, in a stronger position than the president of the United States, who's bogged down with a war he can't budge.
Right. I want to just think about two very simple things here. But one of them is the question of deliverables that Willie was talking about before, because that's what Trump's metric is, right? He wants to be able to come back from a summit and say, we signed the biggest deal ever on this. We made the biggest agreement ever on that. He yesterday touted this Boeing thing, right? Which was kind of they agreed to buy 200 jets. The Wall Street's expectation was that the deal was going to be somewhere closer to 500, and Boeing shares went down 5% yesterday on the news that Trump was touting. Huge deal for Boeing. 200. They thought it was only going to be 150. Well, Wall Street told you exactly what it thought about that deal, and I think that in and of itself is not a big deal, but that's the kind of thing Trump wants to take credit for. The second thing is your point about what looked kind of pathetic, and I saw your Hippocratic headline, made me think about the Greeks and the fact that you have Xi Jinping. The context for that Truth Social post that Trump put up was Xi Jinping is talking to Trump, apparently in private, about the Thucydides trap. The Thucydides trap is about what happens when a rising power and there's a declining power. He didn't call the United States the declining power, but said, we have to be careful, China and the U.S., to avoid the Thucydides trap, because what often happens in the Thucydides trap is that the declining power sees the rising power and provokes a war. So basically, this is Xi Jinping saying, let's not get into war, but the implication was
decline,
that the U.S. was in decline. And Trump's response to that was so sad. I mean, not just the fact that he's blaming Joe Biden, Mika, but let's read the first sentence of it where he says something like, yesterday, when Xi Jinping so elegantly...
I have it here. When President Xi very elegantly referred to the United States as perhaps being a declining nation.
That's all you need.
It's
an amazing thing to write. It's one of the more incredible Trump sentences ever. Yeah. As he very elegantly, because I can't ever say anything critical of Xi Jinping, let alone... He
never does.
Right, but that is just he treats, in that, he sounds like he's talking about Vladimir Putin. And I think you didn't have to pin the tail on the donkey and say the United States is the declining power for it to be very clear that in the optics and dynamics and on any metric that Trump understands, let alone the rest of the world, which of those two countries is the declining country. And Xi Jinping didn't need to say it directly. It's pretty clear to everyone where they stand in terms of relative power and trajectory.
Working class Americans would agree with that.
Just
why on a grand scale.
Why speak that way to an authoritarian leader who has the greatest firewall in the world in terms of stopping the free flow of information, who's jailed Jimmy Lai, the publisher, pro-democracy advocate from Hong Kong. Yes, and Donald Trump has no problem belittling political rivals in the U.S. and being incredibly mean to other people, you know, and I just, looking back, Trump made his bed here.
Yeah.
There were 3 key mistakes he made. First was this trade war with China, the one he started out with all the tariffs. He lost that trade war. And that China came back at him. This was before the last meeting in Seoul. That did not work. He was going to, you know, bring the Chinese to their knees. It didn't work. The second thing was I think the obsession with first Canada as the 51st state, but then Greenland. And he destroyed, essentially, the relationship with Europe and NATO. That was a major mistake. And then the last one, obviously, is this war with Iran. So it's 3 geostrategic mistakes, in my view, and I talked to experts about it, that led him to come into this summit in a very weak position. And we saw that.
The first and the last point that you made, leading to massive economic struggle. Sam Stein here at home with rising gas prices, rising prices at the grocery store, rising prices for health. I mean, all around Americans, many would argue, are suffering at the rising costs around them and trying to stay afloat.
Look, I'm going to zag ever so slightly here. Like, I think there's some virtue and value to trying to make sure that relations with China are non-combative and productive in some respects. And if Trump can get a reduction in tariffs, if he can get more Chinese purchases of American farm equipment and our beef, for instance, that's great for the country. It's good. But, you know, it will take time. That's the zag. Now, what I will say is, and we're going back to these true social posts because that's really all we have to work off of at this point, is it's remarkable how little actual prep it appears went into all this. Usually during these things, and David and Jonathan can attest to this, they go into these summits with deliverables already baked in. And they'll have, copious amount of paperwork to hand out. They'll have briefings to give to reporters. And they'll have things to tout and crow about after the fact. And when Trump appeared on Fox News last night to talk about this, it was all in the abstract. Very little about what we were talking about with China with respect to Iran, for instance. And then if you look at his Truth Social feed this morning, it's ridiculous. The two main posts are him glowing at the fact that they made that 30-foot tall gold statue of him at Trump Doral. And the other one that Jonathan Lemire talked about, which is how China has a ballroom and how great the ballroom is. A functioning, operational White House would have more to crow about, would have baked in the accomplishments in advance, would be coming back from China with the deliverables already there. But that's not this White House.
And again, the one deal that was announced by President Trump in an interview with Sean Hannity when he said Boeing's buying 200 jets. Chinese officials asked about that, did not confirm that even had happened, and it's even lower than was expected, as John pointed out. One other question for you before we go to break here, David, is the CIA director's visit to Cuba yesterday. John Ratcliffe went to Cuba, was talking to people there, saying effectively, we want to come in here, we want to help you, we want to bring capital, we want to bring all those things, but you must change your regime if you're going to get our help. Is Cuba sort of next on the list for this administration after Venezuela and Iran?
I think they are, because it's a lot easier to pick on a small island that's 90 miles from the United States than it is to deal with a power the size of China. So it's an intimidation effort. Ratcliffe has risen a lot inside the administration. He spends most of his time at the White House, I'm told. That's also about FaceTime with the boss. So it's important, and that's also a Marco Rubio effort. And he generally has handled things well. There were talks about a peace deal in Lebanon run by Rubio's team, and the people involved have told Julia Jester, our colleague, that those are going well. They're just well organized, which can't be said about the rest of the administration. And just the last thought on China, I don't know if this is a strategy, but it almost seems like the Chinese aren't announcing any deals or confirming anything as a way to just, again, make Trump look weak.
Totally agree.
No NVIDIA, no jets,
right.
Yeah.
The Chinese wanted the non-deliverable summit here.
I mean, Sam points out the goals of maybe potentially reduction in tariffs or help on Iran. I mean, these are two products of this administration's creation. So they need help on their own problems. And here are the headlines. I mean, it all is about sort of Trump going to him. Trump butters up Xi, who stands his ground. Xi gives Trump warning on Taiwan. Trump might welcome Chinese investment. America might not. It's
She looks strong.
It's a wash. It's a failure or a wash.